Another one of my, examples of this electrical creation and such has to do with the Sphinx. And I did a piece on the Sphinx that I've cut this from. This is an original picture of the Sphinx itself when it was first found prior to its excavations. It's very important to note that the head of the Sphinx was black. And that's because the Sphinx is an example of the machine of the pyramids breaking down at the very end. It is an example of the head overloading, and that overloading process discharged the nose off of the Sphinx, and not just off the nose of the Sphinx. It is my sense that there was an electromagnetic connection to all of the different sites within Egypt. And it wasn't that the noses of the pharaohs were just broken off out of spite. They were all part of a machine that discharged, and the nose was part of an electrical circuit that discharged off. It is the only way to explain the symmetry of the discharge. And one of the ways that we can note that there was electromagnetism on the Sphinx is this picture of the Sphinx's chest right after it was excavated. And, we know that the ground itself was formed by limestone. And that really isn't how the ground formed. The ground was originally formed in layers of mud and a clay. And that's why it lays relatively flat. That's how it was laid down by the formation of creation. And in the apocalypse, the electromagnetic pulse hardened the entire crust of the earth. This is why your limestone has all of these flat striations in it. These are different layers of clay that, like a pot, were baked into place. But it was the electromagnetism that was flowing through the Sphinx that formed these vertical lines that you see on the right side of the chest. And it is the two hemispheres, like you saw in the bulb around Gunung Padang. These are the two bulbs of electromagnetism around the Sphinx. And because we're looking at electromagnetism, it occurred to me that what the Sphinx really represented was what's known as a gliding arc reactor. And when you look at it from the gliding arc reactor, then this hole they find on the top of the Sphinx is actually just it's just a stovetop. It's just a pipe where gases were released from this gliding arc reactor.
It's serving the same function as the shafts coming off the Queen's chamber and the King's chamber.
Exactly what it was.
It's like a release pressure valve.
And I'm a fan of the Land of Chem's theory that these were forming and creating fertilizer. But his theory is that this was being struck by, massive arcs of lightning. That's too much energy all at once for anything useful to occur. If that occurs, we know that when lightning strikes the ground, it leaves massive holes. This was utilizing a low level of non-thermal plasma. And when it did that, it actually created the separation of water into its two primary elements of hydrogen and oxygen. And the reason that we haven't discovered what the use of the pyramids were is because hydrogen and oxygen don't leave any signs. They don't leave any chemical trace. There's no crust on the material because hydrogen doesn't do that. It doesn't leave a chemical signature. And so when you look at it from a gliding arc reactors operate at just about room temperature. They operate around 85, 90, 95 degrees. They don't require high temperatures. What they required an electromagnetic connection, and that electromagnetic connection was with the sun. And that connection off of the electromagnetism of the Sphinx is what created the electrical sputtering around the Sphinx. And so I know that you and others have theorized that there is water erosion in the walls around the Sphinx. But the thing is, there's no water erosion on the surface around the Sphinx. It's only inside of that box. And that's because the electrical sputtering of the Sphinx was contained within that area. And in order for the Sphinx to continue to operate, it had to be rebuilt over time, which was why you had the bricks relayed over the pause and relayed over the structure over time was in order for it to continue to operate as a grounding magnet in a gliding arc reactor.
Right.
And,
Well, you
and
do. You do.
this,
Hey, well, I just got to interject,
yeah,
and then you can continue on. I have many things to say about many things that you've shown, but one thing I have to correct you on right here is uh, there is no association between the research of myself and Graham Hancock, Robert Schoch, Robert Bovell. I'm trying to get any of those men to debate. That says the water damage to the Sphinx has nothing to do with rainfall. I've covered this in multiple presentations, so I'm in agreement with you. But the
good.
comment you made kind of put me in the same boat as them, and I need you to know
Oh,
that I'm very, very different.
very good. Yeah, and that's good to know. And because I'm not discounting whether or not water existed inside of the box or not. My notation is that if you look at, the experiments done by there's a gentleman by the name of Billy Yelverton, and you can look up Billy Yelverton's YouTube channel. And Billy Yelverton, who's this image that I have here, Billy Yelverton shows how an electromagnetic current will create sputtering in the sand below. And that electrical sputtering is what creates the etching within the walls. It looks like water etching, but that's because electrical sputtering has very much the same shape as water, because water itself really erodes like an electrical current. Current is current, whether it's water or electricity. And so, people have often noted the location of the Sphinx in relation to the moon and the sun. And if you look at it from an electromagnetic standpoint, then you begin to understand that the electromagnetic connection of a gliding gliding arc reactor, is the very first step in creating a chemical change to water. Now, Jay of the Project Unity recently was at Giza, and he made note that there are these breaks in the ground where there seem to have been tubes. And he gives you this theory that maybe there was an electrical wire that ran through these tubes. There was no electrical wire that ran through the tubes. There's no existence and there's no evidence for iron or iron filings or wires laying around near these. These were literally plasma tubes delivering and connecting energy between the different pyramids. And the start of that process began at the Sphinx, which faced, into the spring, it's faced into the solstice, which is to say it faced in the area that gave it the greatest connection year round to the sun's energy.
Well, the Sphinx faces east. It would face, according to Graham Hancock's model, in 10,500 BC, the Sphinx faces east, which is where the constellation Leo would have been directly on the horizon, right where the Sphinx faces. This is his model. I totally disagree with it, but I get what you're saying.